Market is the reason why all businesses exist. And we have to be aware of that. For me, the simple definition of HR is being a good human being and aware of what your customer wants. Connection between the talent, the organization, and the leadership has to be supported by extremely strong systems and processes.
Hey everybody, welcome to the next episode of Close the Loop. Really excited to have the CHRO of Impresario Group, Ambarish Sharma, with us today. We're going to touch on the journey of somebody from outside of the HR industry to CHRO and what that looks like. I think we have a really good episode lined up and excited to host this one today. Hey Ambarish, thank you for joining us today.
Ryan, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, we like to just get right into it. So I think, how did you go from outside of people teams to leading people now at a really, really large and fast-growing company?
Right. So this just goes back to my engineering days, and I think I should start from there. I have had a very, very good 20 years in HR, but there was a very important point in life where I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. And that point was somewhere in third year of my engineering, where I started interacting with the industry. And I found a lot of people who have grown into senior leadership roles don't necessarily come from engineering background. I think that was one of the most important things which I stuck with, and I thought I should get into the management field. And the best way to get into management that time was to get admission in one of the great MBA colleges and then get placed through campus. So that's exactly what happened with me. So I took up my first job as an engineering trainee with Hutchison Max Telecom, based at Bombay. And the following year, I got placed at Symbiosis, which is one of the best colleges in India. Worked with TCS as Associate Engagement Officer, learned the tricks of the trade, so to speak. Yeah. To someone like me coming from an engineering background and then learning, as I said, the tricks of the trade, it was a very steep learning curve. I spent a good about 3 years in going through various facets of HR. So I moved responsibilities right from associate engagement to talent acquisition to performance management, talent acquisition, resource allocation group for a short while.
TCS gave you the whole journey,
gamut of learning. I wanted to get into consulting at some point. And to learn in depth about the technical part of HR is what was exciting to me, I think.
And at Wipro, in that role in HR consulting, was that with external clients?
Yes. Yeah. So I moved to Wipro Consulting as a consultant in HR and people capability maturity model.
Got it.
Which was, again, a very new thing for me that time. And then I started working with the external clients. One of them was into pharmaceuticals, another into infrastructure. Very large clients.
What was that transition like? Because I'm sure a lot of people in our audience have thought about going in HR consulting and what it might be like to do that design work with external clients. How did that go for you?
So it was extremely challenging, to say the least, because when you are in an in-house role, working with your own in-house teams, the challenges are very different. But when you're in the client, and especially when you're tagged to a particular dollar value as your annual target to achieve, and then you have the pressures of the delivery.
It's on,
It's just on. And moving from a sort of very comfortable, generic HR role to a client-facing role where every meeting counts is quite a different experience. And I think it's a very enriching experience because you learn how to perform under pressure. Second, you learn the technical aspects of HR, which you wouldn't normally be exposed to in a generic HR role.
Because you're at the design level.
Exactly. So, you are not just implementing things which have been in existence for years, but now you're designing something which is tailored to the needs of a particular client. So that itself is a very interesting learning curve. And for me to work with a very small team and a very demanding boss was really an eye-opener. It was, if I may put it that way, more of a baptism by fire than anything else. If I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be sitting with companies like KPMG at Doha
That's
which
where
I
you went
later
next.
moved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
that
that was a
transition,
company switch and a geography switch.
it was, and it was a very big change again. So for me, moving from a TCS to a Wipro Consulting to a KPMG was a graduation.
Yeah.
And KPMG being one of the
Big Four.
top, one of the top consulting firms, Big Four in the audit space, was definitely a highlight of my career till that point.
Yeah.
Just
And a big move
and
also,
a big
right?
move,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what was it like? I think
Right.
you're doing HR consulting there, but now in a different country. So
Exactly.
what did you have to learn?
But then there was a very different dynamic involved there. Doha had just come out of 2006 Asian Cup. And the state had invested a lot of funds into setting up new companies. Organizations from oil and gas to infrastructure to telecommunications, hospitality, were all vying for a place there, where we had just finished Asian Games, and the companies were setting up shop. Now, the immediate requirement was to set up the entire organization, but starting from your HR organization structure, then you go to policies and procedures, you do comp and ben, and so on. So that is what was exciting for me, the timing of it. And also in terms of geography, I didn't know where Qatar is except watching a few matches
somewhere
in
there.
the Middle East. So a lot of us, of course, my family, they thought it's a part of Saudi Arabia. And with very strict laws, and as one would assume,
you're like getting to know an entire region.
Getting to know entire region.
Right.
So it was a very difficult move for me in the beginning, where first I had to convince my Wipro Consulting boss, and then to convince my family.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
I sort of made a deal with my parents that it's a 2-year stint and I'd be back. But then, as luck would have it, I spent a good 17 years there. Extremely satisfying. A major part of my career spent developing organizations from scratch, worked with multiple startups. The working conditions were not ideal, but they were interesting. So I went through that entire cycle where I worked with a few construction companies setting up shop there, where we literally worked out of desert. Their office would be in a porta cabin with 50-degree temperatures.
Feel the heat.
And the meetings would go on for days on end. And I've had the pleasure of working with some of the great names in the business in Qatar, right from the royal family to who's who in the business sector. And that was all thanks to my big move from generic HR to a consulting role. Had I not done that, I would have limited myself to the organizations where I was engaged, rather than getting that exposure to various organizations across sectors. And also the opportunity to work with a very different leadership team. Now, what I mean by that is, if you're in an organization long enough, and for me it's about a 5-year time, you basically become a part of that ecosystem. And everyone you work with is well known to you. Things become much easier. There are different dynamics, right? But then in an environment like consulting, you're constantly exposed to different leadership styles, different egos, different challenges, and that's what enriches one's experience. And I think I benefited a lot. At one point, I almost gave up because there were major failures. A few of the projects which we embarked on didn't work as planned, and there were financial implications due to that. But then that was taken in our stride. The company was strong enough to sort of absorb some of those negative impacts. So that's a little bit about consulting and my stint with KPMG.
Well, on that, I mean, I think a lot of folks in our audience who probably many today are doing people leadership, people management within orgs, right, in that function.
Yeah.
And I know conversations I've had with people, it seems like that making that jump seems a little bit confusing or difficult. Do you have any advice for people? What are like the first few steps to even thinking about making a jump like that? Are there any prereqs to getting there?
Right. So it again sounds very cliched, but what matters here is what you feel in your heart, right?
Yeah.
Now, in my case, I was absolutely sure that I wanted to do consulting. There was no two ways about it. And I assessed my competencies compared to what is required in consulting.
Yeah.
And what struck me as outstanding was my people management skills. Now, that was the primary reason why I came to HR from engineering, right? Now, the move from a generic role to consulting was driven by that particular aspect of my personality and also my strength.
Got it.
So I knew that if I can strike a chord with the clients, I would be able to solve whatever issue comes my way. And that was exactly what I did with a small team that I had. My major focus was on relationship building rather than the technical side of consulting and making sort of presentations and then selling the ideas and so on. It became much easier for me to engage with the leaders and sell my ideas through informal channels more than I did through my presentations. So presentations for me would be basically a closing sort of session. But then all the work of selling my idea, going through the motions of talking about numbers, data points, would happen in separate meetings, mostly one-on-one with the senior leadership teams. And that all gave very good results when it came to sitting in the boardroom and making that final presentation.
Got it. Got it. So I mean, maybe just to put it one way, you're very confident that your skill set would align with consulting. And then, did you ever think that when you were getting into consulting, you might come back to now then lead people teams?
Right. So
or was it sort of partner and that's it?
Right. Yeah. Right. So that was never the plan. I basically wanted to be a consultant for as long as I could. And no matter how demanding it was, money wasn't that great. I'm not shy to say that. But then things would have panned out completely different if I had stuck with consulting. In consulting, one of the major challenges I saw was work-life balance, to be absolutely honest. That is something which was hurting me and my family. When I got married in early 2010s, I basically realized that the amount of hours which I'm investing into my consulting role was going beyond 12 hours a day.
Sure.
Now, that's not practical for a very long-term career.
Really probably gained that confidence back that, wow, like I was on the side of things, I did consulting, now I'm back and we're crushing it, right? So nice. Sky's the limit now.
That was a sort of coming back to what I was good at. Also, one very important competency which unfortunately a lot of my HR colleagues lack is their acumen to first collate and then frame numbers for meaningful decision support. Now, dashboarding is a very simple term, but in HR, that's a very sought after skill set.
Right.
So I gained that competence while I was at consulting. Because that was just a non-negotiable number one competence, right?
Yeah. So no, I've heard it from so many of folks like yourself who we've gotten the pleasure to work with that, and maybe it's a question the audience might have is how do you build that skill set of like data-driven decision making within your team?
So it's partly through a few courses which I took early on when I joined HR from engineering. One was finance for non-finance manager. Now it looks like one of the basic things which everyone must know. I did it quite early on, and also the Excel skills which come in handy. Especially during those days, it was one of the best skill sets you could have apart from everything else. There were softwares available in companies like TCS, Wipro, and KPMG, which could ease that work. But I was working with startups where there was no question you had to do everything on your own.
Right.
And unless you had those skills, you wouldn't be a consultant by far. So for me, it was a blessing in disguise that I had done these courses in the beginning. I was focused on developing those competencies. So when I was consulting, I was not in a dark spot in every sense of the word. So I was looked at as someone who could not just do HR, but also could give me a ROI on an investment on an ERP system, for example. So that's a very important skill set, which I think puts you apart from everyone else immediately.
Yeah.
And
how did you inculcate it with your teams? Like you're now, back in functional leadership and a CHRO level, you have, say, HRBPs, talent act folks who are managing funnels, right? How do you drive it with them now as a people leader of your function also?
Right. So very interesting. That's one of my strengths as well in terms of how you succeed as a team, right? So when you reach a level of HR leader in any organization, you can be only as good as your team. Now, for me, first identifying the right team tends to be the number one priority. Now, every organization I have been to, I have looked at my current team and assessed their competencies, did a quick gap analysis, found what are the areas of improvements, and get on with it immediately. I don't really spend time in thinking, should I keep this person in my team? Should I find a replacement? I rather do the gap analysis, which is a very technical way of looking at training needs, and then immediately get on with training them. And within a period of 3 months or so, in general, I've been able to turn around most of my folks. So the gaps which people have in HR are, and those I'm talking about the ones who have been in HR for 3 to 5 years kind of timelines, is primarily because they're not aware of those areas of weaknesses. And once you show them that and you tell them what would be the benefits of filling those gaps, they basically come around and become very good performing team members. So for me, the team competence is what has been the focus area, and it has led to a great amount of success for the overall HR function. And I continue to do that. Even in my current team, we have embarked on a very nice journey about 3 months back, where we have put people on performance improvement plans. I think our teams are what drive our success. They define to what level we are perceived as successful.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it seems like you take an appropriately people-centered approach towards developing your own team, which is like really nice and encouraging to hear.
Right.
And since then, I mean, you've been kind of functionally leading HR teams in really fast-growing environments now a number of times, right? And so maybe if you can just briefly touch on each of those, just to catch everyone up in terms of what gets us today into your current role at Impresario, and then we'd love to, I think, maybe pull out as our last kind of bit here is, love to pull out some of the actionable lessons that any of our audience who are in fast growth environments could maybe take in and deploy.
Right.
Because you've done a lot now across so many places.
Right. Yeah. No, interesting you asked that. Of course, it's been a very, very good journey for me. I've grown over the ranks. Notable achievements over the periods have been quite a few, but mostly around developing the businesses where I have held this role. Most of the businesses where my involvement has been there have seen a better people structure, and that applies to every company I've worked with. In fact, I believe unless we give a proper structure to the HR function, we would not be able to be idealistic and aim for better things like customer centricity, for example. So you need to first look in-house to be able to provide the insights which your organization needs to develop and sort of fill up the gaps first before you can say that I'm customer-centric and now I want to serve my customers best. So the journey throughout has been fantastic. I have taught a lot of people on what's HR. And for me, the simple definition of HR is being a good human being and aware of what your customer wants. Now, the customers for HR is not a traditional, balanced scorecard-based approach. It's simply the market. The market is the reason why all businesses exist, and we have to be aware of that. So for me, people of my organization are not assets for the organization. They are the assets for my customers. And that approach has meant a lot in terms of how I look at HR, how I develop the overall people function. I believe in Dave Ulrich is one of my favorite HR folks whom I follow quite regularly. So, the connection between the talent, the organization, and the leadership has to be supported by extremely strong systems and processes. Now, that again goes back to my being an engineer by education, and then also by being a consultant.
Yeah.
So for me, HR has never been a common sense function. It's not based on your experience and your personal competencies alone. There's a very large body of work which is available. We just need to dig out the gold nuggets of wisdom from there and apply it to what you do as a HR leader.
Any resources that you continuously look to as a leader?
Yes. So in India, I found this site HR, which I'm very fond of. It's a very simple website which gives you day-to-day HR routine resources.
Okay.
But more importantly, Dev Ulrich has been my go-to person whenever it comes to any subject related to HR-related matters.
We all stand on the shoulder of giants. So
Exactly.
yeah, I think we all have our role models.
Absolutely.
That makes a ton of sense. Anything that you'd want to leave the audience with today?
Right. So one of the most important lessons for me has been that HR is only as good as how it knows the business and how it leads the business. HR is not about people alone. It's more about your business and more about your customers. So as long as you understand your business needs and you're able to rally your people to meet the vision, mission of the organizations in the long term, is what would define success. That's what gets you the respectability in the boardroom, and that's what satisfies one as a professional. In the absence of that, you become one of the many other departments, but not really the differentiator. So HR has a very important role to play, which is that of a catalyst, an accelerator, a guide, mentor, and most importantly, the custodian of the culture of the organization to give it a direction, aligning it with what the market needs and what your customers are looking for. And I wish most of the HR professionals look at HR as such and focus more on business, less on jargon, semantics, and the academic side of HR.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, well said. I think, well, thanks so much for the time. I think today we covered most of the journey, some of the lessons, and some real advice, I think, to people considering the jump from function to consulting. So I think we'll need to get you back on and do this again, but I'll leave you to the continued success at Impresario Group and the amazing results you guys are achieving. And thanks so much, Ambarish, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It was a good discussion. I really enjoyed. I look forward to coming back and sharing some of my other experiences.
We'll do it again sometime.
Right? Thank you very much.